Hey everybody, welcome back to another session of the NCCER CSST. We're going to go ahead and kick it off tonight. We're kicking off with module 75213. It's going to be page 13.1, folks, okay? So if you want to go ahead and turn to that page, that's where we're going to go ahead and get it started. So let me go ahead and let you know what the game plan will be for tonight, okay? We're going to go ahead and knock out 13.1, which is accident investigations, policies, and procedures. And we're also going to go ahead and we timed it out so that way we could knock out 14.1 tonight too, accident investigations and data analysis, okay? So we're going to knock both of these sections out tonight. Even if we may or may not, we'll definitely finish on time tonight. I don't think we'll go over. If anything, we may go a few minutes short, but we're going to see what happens at the break because the next section is record keeping, and record keeping is going to take a little bit longer. So we're going to see if we can get if we only get through 13 before the break, and then we definitely will not start record keeping tonight. Okay. Alrighty, folks. So let's go ahead and get it cranked out. Okay. So let's talk about accident investigations and policies and procedures. And let me go ahead and first of all start off with this. Right, is that NCCER still kind of classifies things, and we talked about this in previous modules, and in the first book as well, in the field safety book, is that NCCER still classifies things as accident versus incident, and basically saying that an accident involves personal injury, fatality, significant illness, or significant property damage. And then an incident would be more like a near miss, a mishap, where there would be no injury and very little property damage, if any. So, uh, like we've talked about multiple times, industry wide, we see that this has kind of changed over the last few years, especially with OSHA and best practices, especially in many refineries and many government and military settings as well. Nowadays, in law enforcement, nowadays we're referring more to accident, more something that could have been prevented. Excuse me, accident, something that could have not been prevented, and an incident, something that could have been prevented. So, and as most of us know, that most mishaps could have been prevented either through some type of education, training, better work practices, better equipment maintenance. Different reasons like that. Okay. Let me give you a perfect example. Um, how many of us these days really fill out an accident report? Most of us have probably not filled out an accident report in at least the last 5 to 7 years. And the reason being is because we're filling out incident reports, or we're filling out injury and illness reports. Or property damage. So that's why I say that. Okay. In addition to that, also is law enforcement. If you hear law enforcement on the news these days, and even the media is starting to catch on, most of the things, let's say if you have a vehicle wreck, right? They're calling it a wreck, a collision, the incident, the event. The word they're not using these days is accident. Okay, and like I said, my opinion is because accidents could have been prevented. Accidents could not have been prevented. However, incidents could have. So therefore, most events or mishaps are incidents. Okay. Let me bring it back to you one more time. Might bring us a little bit closer to home. Is when you're a young child, right? And what happened when we broke something or something happened, or anybody who's got kids out there, right? And something happens. First thing the kid yells, or first thing we would yell is, "Oh, sorry, it was an accident," or "We didn't mean to do it. It was an accident." And what happens to the adult? The adult usually has it right. The adult will turn around and say, "Oh no, there's no such thing as accidents," or "If you would have been paying attention, it wouldn't happen. If you wouldn't have been running, it wouldn't have happened." So there's a perfect example of it. That most mishaps that happen even in our personal lives, could have been prevented. So therefore, that's why we're not really calling them accidents. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. But let me for NCCR purposes, for course purposes, and test purposes, let's go ahead and go through them. Right. The only difference between an accident and an incident is the outcome. That's NCCER's position. Incidents are events that do not result in personal injury or property damage, right? Incidents act as basically free warnings, like near misses, basically. And then what happens is accidents are the opposite, right? Accidents are property damage, personal injury, death, is what NCCR is classified as an accident. So, like I said, I think this has changed slightly since the book was published, but that's NCCR's position, so that's what we're going to go for. And then, like I said, normally in industry or on my personal opinion, like I said, I gave you the flip side of it, okay? So regardless, whether it's an incident or an accident, we're still going to have to do an investigation. We're still going to have to conduct an investigation. Therefore, so we can get to the cause or the causes that created this mishap, right? This event. And the biggest reason, why do we want to do that? Well, we want to prevent future events, right? We want to prevent future incidents, future accidents, mishaps, whatever you want to call it. We want to go ahead and prevent all that. So that's why it's so important for us to conduct those inspections. Okay, and you'll see that as we get through this module. Okay, so roles and responsibilities, right? Investigating accidents or incidents, whatever we're going to talk about, requires the cooperation of all levels of management, right? And every worker on the site. So why all levels of management? Because we may have to go to different departments to get assistance. They may have critical information that we need. They may have been witnessed. They may have something may have been reported to them through the chain of command of their employees. Okay, and then of course also all employees on site. Now it's not all employees, but it's going to be any employee that was either affected or any employee that has factual data that we need to know. Okay. And we talked about interviewing for accidents investigations before, and we're going to go ahead and get back to it tonight. We're going to talk about techniques as well. Okay. Um, so what happens is the person conducting the investigation, they're going to have certain qualifications, right? They're going to have there's certain advantages also to working with other workers that other workers may not have. So what kind of qualities are we talking about? Okay, so let me go ahead and go through the list. I'm looking at the 4 bullet points on 3.2.0. Basically, supervisors know the most absolute most they usually know the most about the situation. They may know firsthand, or they may also know because it was communicated back to them. They also have daily contact, right, and familiarity with the people, the machines, the equipment, any material involved. So they'll have the best perspective often because they knew what was already occurring or what the conditions were prior to any type of negative impact. They know the standard practices, they know the circumstances in the area, right, as well as any hazards that exist or may have existed. Also, supervisors have a personal interest in identifying um, accident causes because they're often protective of their workers, right? You know, machines, equipment, materials. So no employer or most supervisors or employers don't want to see the employee hurt. So we do have a vested interest. We feel bad. We also know it's going to affect our work productivity. We know it's going to affect morale at work. Okay, and then of course, what happens right after, often after you have some type of wreck or accident or incident, and then we're even more apprehensive. So now we're even operating more with caution, which sometimes can also be a greater hazard. Okay. They can also give insight into how to correct the problem, right? Maybe they thought about and they knew, you know, sometimes you hear, well, I knew this was going to happen for this reason. Well, first of all, if we knew it was going to happen, we should have talked about it beforehand, right? We may have and we may not have. Also, but they also may help and give insight, corrective action, so it doesn't happen again. Not only giving us the facts for this particular situation so we can manage this case, this injury, right, this illness, or this fatality, but also for future reference in order to help prevent any more. And then supervisors can take the most immediate action, right, to prevent an accident from reoccurring because they're also familiar with the situation. All right, so being in direct control of the people, any procedures, right, or property in that area is going to give that supervisor the advantage to take immediate corrective action and the greatest opportunity to be effective and to follow up as well. And then, of course, supervisors can communicate more effectively with workers, right? Uh, Workers may be employed by the company. They may talk to directors. They may talk to safety personnel, but ultimately, who do they often have the best relationship and the closest relationship with? Their frontline supervisors. Okay, it's the employees that they work closest to, and we want that cohesiveness, right? We want that cohesiveness collaborative atmosphere where employees can feel and we can feel that we can trust our immediate inline supervisors. And then to a worker also, the first line supervisor often, what's going to happen is it's a level of management, right, that he or she's going to feel comfortable with. Maybe they're not afraid of saying the wrong thing. Maybe they don't think that they're going to implicate themselves in something. Maybe they don't think that we're going to find them at fault, right? So during an accident investigation or an incident investigations, we have to feel free to be honest with our supervisors, right? It's definitely going to help get an accurate information on the event that occurred. Okay. Now, there's also a disadvantage of supervisors investigating their own incidents or accidents as well, right? And why? Well, a lot of times it may force the supervisor, or the supervisor may have the feeling that they have to be unbiased. I'm sorry, that they might wind up being biased, right? So, but we really need somebody that's unbiased in there so that they don't have a preconceived notion, good, bad, or indifferent. So, for example, a supervisor may have to admit that some personal failure on their part, right? Maybe not making the right work assignment, maybe not adequately supervising their employees. And this is where the role of the safety technician is going to become important, because the safety technician is going to be able to provide an unbiased analysis, right, of the accident. Offer objective and corrective feedback, provide quality control. So one of the biggest things, and I can tell you this, is that we have to keep our personal opinions out of it, folks. We should be collecting data and not necessarily worried about analyzing a response or an answer while we're doing the data collection. Okay. So equipment used in an investigation. Let's talk about what we're going to use, right? And again, you're going to see that the book is just a little bit out of date, and it's because technology is changing so fast, right? Camera, film, flash, fresh batteries to take pictures of the accident. Nowadays, we know that we're really not using a camera anymore, right? The flash is already installed on our smartphone now. No film because it's digital, and of course, our phones are rechargeable. So that bullet point right there is just a little bit antiquated, but some people still do use the cameras, right? Some people may use point and shoots, or they may use a 35 millimeter, or they may use an intrinsically safe camera if it's an area where they may have a risk of explosivity or flammability with a LEL hazard there. So for all those reasons, we do need to make sure that that we have an adequate camera, right? We also need a tape measure, preferably maybe like 100-foot tape measure or a measuring wheel, right, to measure evidence and the distance between pieces of evidence as well. So, like I said, a tape measure, hopefully 100 feet. If not, a measuring wheel would always be a good alternative as well. And then if not, at least an adequate or decent tape measure, 25, 35 feet, whatever is necessary. A clipboard or some type of writing pad, something that we can take notes on. Graph paper is always good. I tell people, folks, one of the best things that we can probably do is just create our own graph paper. So let me just take it to let me go ahead and take it to Excel. Okay. One of the easiest things we can do, folks, is this. Hit this arrow right here in Excel. I'm in a Mac, but it's very similar to what it'll look like on a PC, folks. So if I come here, you see the A, I can just come through A through, let's say, J, and I hit this little arrow right here, this little half arrow pointing down and to the right. It's going to grab all my fields at one time. And this is what I'm going to do, right? I'm just going to pull this down, and there you go. I'm going to get down until I can get, let's see, until I can get as close to a square as possible, okay? Or you can set the parameters in it as well. But let's say 60. Let's see what our width is. Let's go to 60. There we go, folks. Okay, now we got a square. Okay, now what I can do is this, is just highlight, let's say a big old chunk out of it out the middle, right? And then right here where you see my borders, I'll go ahead and do some borders, and there you go, folks. I'll just show you the print menu. There you go. Okay, there's some homemade graph paper. So there's not always a necessity to buy some. Just watch your print count. Look at my print count here. I kind of went too far. You see what happened? I went too far. So, what you may want to watch is if you can see these dotted lines right here. These dotted lines are going to be my my print count. So let me go ahead and just delete these. And then I'm going to come down here and do the same thing. Delete all these. And basically what I'm doing, I'm just getting it down to one page, folks. Okay. All right. So there you go. Everything's between the dotted lines now. Let me just go ahead and set up my, my borders, because it may have cut out the last ones. So let's look at it. There you go, folks. Now it's one page, as you see. Okay, and there you go, homemade graph paper. Okay. So just tips like that. And look, folks, just to let you know, I know I'm kind of cruising through some of these examples that I used. Don't forget, we put these videos on YouTube. I know most of you are watching them on YouTube anyway, but I spoke to somebody a couple of days ago, and he said that he's not only watching many of them live, but the ones that he can't watch live, he definitely goes back to YouTube, or even the ones that he does, because he's grabbing examples. So by all means, please feel free to go back to the videos and catch the material that you need, okay? And you can also search things like that in YouTube, and you'd be surprised how many people want to show us how to do the things in Word and PowerPoint, Excel, or whatever the case is. Okay. Um, so what else do we need, right? Well, a ruler, right, to use for scale references and photos as well. So tape measure is good, but also 12-inch ruler would always be good. A 12 or 16-inch ruler. Pens and pencils, right, to write notes and draw on. Something that's erasable is always good. That way we can do an accurate drawing as much as possible and still correct. We're going to need our accident investigation forms to properly document the event or the incident as well. Flashlight and batteries if necessary, so we can clearly see in accident areas, especially nowadays with LED flashlights, folks. I think we're getting access to some really good flashlights for a really good price these days. Okay. And then also the following additional equipment, right, that can be helpful also. Things like accident investigators checklist to make sure that you're following the company's procedures. Also meters and detectors or testing equipment if we need to gather data like air quality, maybe a lumen meter if we need to measure how much light was visible at the time. Okay, so different items like that. Also, possibly we might need a magnifying glass, right? If we do, maybe have one handy just in case, especially if maybe somebody's got something that's embedded in the skin or something like that, and we're trying to find it. Okay, sturdy gloves to protect our hands if we have to handle any type of material. And then remember, right hand protection, right hand, right job, right tool, right job, right PPE, right? If we're dealing with around chemical area, we're doing inspection, we're probably going to want some chemical rated gloves like neoprene, maybe even nitrile gloves, as little as nitrile or as heavy as butyl gloves. And then also, or if it's around lumber or any other heavy equipment, we may be using some type of leather glove, work glove, or Kevlar glove, whatever is necessary, right? High visibility plastic tape to mark off the incident area, right? So we may need to bring in some type of caution tape or something. And then, of course, remember also caution colors, okay? So let me show you an example, folks. Let me go to your caution tape colors. If you don't have caution colors, at a minimum, put caution tape up or string it off or rope it off or whatever the case is, and then identify it with a sign or something. So let me give you perfect examples. Here you go, right? If it's some type of fire hazard or something, if we got a red tape or writing red tape, that's good. Housekeeping or I'll make them be black. Radiation is that's a violet or a magenta color with radiation. Safety first aid green. Defective machinery blue. Traffic control, right, orange because of construction. And then physical hazards and permanent hazards are going to be black and yellow. So that's some examples of caution tape. You can find it like that. That's the color code for 811. So so you can pick different types of caution tape. Like I said, if you don't know what you're dealing with, or you just don't carry that much caution tape, you may go to like a yellow caution or a red do not enter, right? But it's always great to go ahead and identify the hazard if you don't have anything that's as significant as what we just talked about. Okay, so it's not just important to cart off the area. It's also, if it's a fall hazard, right? Let's identify it's a fall hazard. If it's a radiation hazard, let's identify it. Okay, a bloodborne pathogen issue, right? Let's identify it with the biohazard sign that was in the other book. Let me show you really quickly. This is what I'm talking about right here, biohazard, right? You'll find it a lot of times on your bags, on your biohazard bags. If you can't make a copy, grab an extra bag, tape it up somewhere where people can see the biohazard sign, okay? Okay, good. And then in addition to that, also specimen containers, right, to collect evidence. So, specimen containers would be maybe like plastic or glass containers, not just something we grab off the shelf, right? Not like an old butter tub or something like that, or an old screw case or a box that used to hold screws in it or something. What I'm talking about is actual specimen jars. And let's see. That's what I'm talking about. Items like this that you can get at a really good price with Uline. Things like this, right? Could be plastic or glass, depending on what the necessity is. Something that hasn't been contaminated with other product in it, and just depending on what the hazard is. Okay, so just different specimen jars that you may have, Ziploc bags if necessary, as long as it's something that can effectively hold it as well. Also, a compass to gather the most accurate location and data. Also, from time to time, we have the benefit of GPS now on our phones. If it happens somewhere that's in a remote area, the good thing is we have GPS now. Um, Also, a video camera to make the visual record if necessary. And just make sure you check your corporate policy, folks. You got more and more corporate policies now saying no video, or they may say only X amount of photos, or whatever the case is. So just watch your corporate policy on that. And then a tarp to protect any evidence from the weather if necessary, especially when there's like vehicle accidents and things like that. Bloodborne pathogen kit, right? So what am I talking about? Biohazard bags, gloves. So let me see. Talking about something like this, right? It might have some type of glasses in it or goggles in it, gloves. Okay, it might have a mask and disinfectant in it as well. That's look, 15% off if you order tonight, folks. So talking about stuff like that, right? A lot of our first aid kits will have that as well, and then and of course it'll come with the bag because at the end, if any of that material has bodily fluids on it, we want to get into a biohazard bag and go ahead and properly dispose of it. Okay. And then also lockout tagout set if we need it for any reason. What I'm talking about is this. But a lot of safety people aren't trained to actually install the lockout tagout devices, anything like this. We'd probably want to call operations, get them to lock it out, tag it out. Just remember, folks, right? Just because we're responding to an incident or an accident, if we're not qualified to do the job, if we're not qualified, let me give you an example. If there's somebody that fell off of a scaffold and we're not qualified to get on that scaffold, we just, even though we're doing the inspection, we're not allowed to get up there. If we haven't been trained on how to safely access and work on that scaffold, we can't get on it regardless of what our task is. Okay. So just remember, same thing with lockout tagout, right? If we've never been adequately trained and we're not qualified by the employer to apply a lockout tagout device, well, and then lockout and or tagout device, and then we're not allowed to do it. Okay. And then PPE, right? Equipment in the area. So depending on what the requirements are and what the necessities are, also whatever PPE we're going to need. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the timeline a little bit, okay? The timeline of an investigation. So we all know that the quicker and the earlier we do an investigation, the more chances we have to be able to round up and acquire the majority of the evidence, okay? Also, we want to watch cold weather, rain, items like that that can also start to dilute particular hazards or may impede us from doing an adequate investigation. So, like I said, if it's raining or if rain's moving in, especially lightning, that's always a significant risk, and we may not be able to capture everything we need. And the same thing with cold weather, snow, okay, fog may also cause those kind of issues as well, folks. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Um, so that investigative timeline, right? We want to follow certain steps to provide a sample timeline for investigations. So let's go ahead and go through the 4-step process, right? The investigator should begin investigating the accident immediately, right? After the injured person's been treated, or if they've been removed from the scene, and then let's go ahead and start doing the investigation process, right? And we want to do it before any important evidence is removed, destroyed, or cleaned up. And the investigator should look and listen for clues as well, right? So we should look for different indicators and go ahead and grab samples, photos, make notes, or whatever necessary that we need to do. Also, the investigator should discuss the accident with the injured person if possible. If the person's conscious and if it's not going to affect their medical attention, well, yeah, let's interview them, right? Let's try to get as much information as we can. After first aid has been administered, also care and tact are important, right? When we're going to be interviewing the worker, the worker may be embarrassed. They may think their job is in jeopardy. They may be disciplined. They may be scared. They may be in shock. So there's so many different reasons why we definitely want to go ahead and play it cool and make sure that the employee knows that we've got their best interest in mind. Okay. Also, the investigator should talk with witnesses, right, who are at the scene of the accident or who arrived shortly there afterwards. So remember this, right, is that when we talk to witnesses, it should take place at the scene, preferably, right? So if we had a fall and we can investigate and interview at that site, if the site has not been considered to be deemed to be unsafe or at risk, well, then let's try to interview them at that site. It'll make a whole lot easier. They'll be able to point, describe, explain, and it makes it a whole lot easier than them just giving us an audio and trying to give us a visual with hands or a drawing. Okay. If not, what do we do, right? If we can't, well, then let's try to get some pictures of the scene, right? Let's try to get some pictures, a diagram, a floor plan, whatever we need that we can possibly give them. Okay. And then also talking to those witnesses, like we said, it should take place at the scene, right? The situation sometimes can be stressful, though, right, for certain witnesses. So we want to make sure that we conduct the interview, as close as possible, but at the same time, as far away from the scene as possible, or from other employees that may influence that person's um, recollection of the events that happened. Okay. And then the investigators who should ask for all details can give clues to the cause of the accident, right? So so keep this in mind, right? Is that witnesses sometimes give more detailed information when they explain events and in reverse chronological order, right? So from the injury and moving backwards, rather than from the beginning of the day or the beginning of the shift and moving towards the injury. Okay. The investigator should also encourage witnesses to share other ideas about what happened, but only if the factual questions of who, what, when, where, and why, and how are being answered. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Um, it also may lead to more clues or an accident, right? So let me give you an example of this, and let's talk about witnesses for a moment, right? Witnesses. We have two types of witnesses normally in the legal process. We have fact witnesses and we have expert witnesses. Okay. So who are expert witnesses? Expert witnesses is somebody that knows the subject matter, right? Let's say if I'm excessively strong in lockout tagout and we had a lockout tagout failure and we have an employee that got burned, right, from a compressor that energized, let's say, or a torch that energized. Well, I might be a subject matter expert, so I'm going to be reviewing evidence and then giving my opinion on it. That's a subject matter expert or a fact witness. Those witnesses, that's an expert witness. Expert witnesses are often paid. Most likely they're going to be paid. The rest of the witnesses will be fact witnesses. Who are fact witnesses? Somebody that heard something, saw something, felt something, smelled something, tasted something. Okay, so let's go back to our senses, right? So it's somebody who was going to be in proximity of the event or got there shortly there afterwards. And we don't want their perception on what may have happened. We may also ask for that possibly, but the main thing what we want is fact, right? And this is what I tell people. Let me give you some examples, y'all. Employee got hurt. Let's say an employee got their hand cut, right, and lost a knuckle or whatever due to a guard or a press being missing on a machine, on a manufacturing piece of equipment, let's say, or a chop saw, right? Well, these are the things I want to know. What did you see, right? Tell me what you saw right before so-and-so Jim Smith got injured, right? What did you see while he got injured or shortly afterwards? What did you hear? Did you hear him talking? Was he on the phone? Was somebody else talking to him? Right? So what did you hear? What did you smell? What did you feel? What did you taste? So, Those are all fact, folks. Okay, they're telling us what they heard. Any of their senses, what they sensed, and all of those are pretty much um, facts that we can go ahead and put together. Okay, so what we don't want to do is ask like open or closed-ended questions, like yes and no questions, right? We want to ask, what, and a lot of whys. Why were y'all cutting with a saw with no guard, right? Oh, well, we didn't have a bigger saw. Why didn't you have a bigger saw? Did you do a JSA? Yeah. Did you notice that? Did you talk about it that you may not be able to cut it on a chop saw? Yes, we did. Okay. So why didn't you get a new saw blade, right? Or the supervisor didn't. Well, why did he feel he couldn't get it? And just on, folks. Okay. Um, Taproot or root cause analysis. A lot of times they call it the 5 whys, and it's basically you keep on asking why until you can't ask why anymore. Okay, and that's what leads you to your final answer. Is once you can't ask why anymore, and then you're pretty much tapped out. Okay, so that's just another example of items you can use as well. All right, so let's talk about if an accident is fatal, right? We're going to also take some additional steps now. So let's talk about what additional steps we'd be taking. Um, we want to take accurate measurements, right? Be as accurate as possible to find the physical relationship between the body and any equipment or material that was involved. We want to photograph the accident and its surroundings. Um, Photos are important, right? Since the information is going to be lost on the scene after it's been cleaned up. It's hard to describe what happened. It's easier just to explain with a photo and maybe go ahead and narrate over it. Okay. Um, also, in addition to that, photos also allow you to revisit the scene later, right? Especially if you can put together some type of panoramic photo set. Don't take photos of the body unless there's a specific purpose for doing so. A lot of times, folks, that's what I tell people. It's above our pay grade. So I'll let management work it out and they'll tell me what they want. And look, at this point, folks, a lot of people are putting their work on pause so we can handle this incident. Okay. Don't just assume that we have that responsibility, that right. So definitely want to check with supervision so that so that we don't overstep our authority. Okay. And then also, in addition, like we're talking about photographing, and then don't take photos of the body, like we just talked about. And then photos of the body can also cause needless headaches, right, to the victim's family as well. Because now all of a sudden they may be looking at photos of their family member, loved one being deceased or significantly injured or maimed, whereas prior to really they just had a visual of it rather than a visual confirmation. Okay. And then also collect and identify any and all related materials, right? So we want to mark it in relation to the accident scene. The evidence may be used in the accident scene just in case we need to reconstruct it. So we want to go ahead and start labeling and also inventorying what we have as well. Okay. And then following those steps, right, it gives the investigators the best chance to collect accurate information and to prove and to provide corrective action or feedback. Okay, so this is the thing is that would be normally be considered a first level investigation. Some companies we're going to have a second level investigation, right, or an alternate level investigation. And basically, what it is, it's a term, it's some type of team or committee that are working to investigate accidents, right, involving serious injuries or property damage. The team of the committee may replace the first line supervisor's investigation, and it may serve as a secondary level investigation. So, secondary level, when do we need to consider? Why would we want to do a second level investigation? That the accident has occurred, right, or could have been very serious in results, or it was serious in results. The nature of the accident is very complex. Lockout, tagout failure, perfect example, right? Maybe the failing of rigging, okay, for crane and rigging could be another example. Also, the accident involved one or more supervisors from the crew, because if it involves supervisors, we don't want them doing their own investigation, right? We want to definitely have some non-biased and independent investigation going on. And then the initial investigation didn't clearly establish the full range of contributing factors. Maybe the person who did the initial investigation, maybe they weren't able to come up with with conclusive evidence or decisive evidence. Okay, so that's another example, another reason why. And then conducting interviews, right? So let's talk about conducting interviews for a minute. So, let's say we've once we have the documented, right, the scene, the accident scene, and then it's going to be important to start getting data through the interview process, right, of witnesses, employees, other contractors, whatever the case may be. Why do we want to do accident interview? Because we want to get accurate and comprehensive picture, right? Why do we want to be accurate and comprehensive? So that we can determine root causes or reasons, either multi-causations or individual causes of why we had an incident. Okay, why do we want to do that? So we can prevent injuries. Okay, so it's all a process, and we're always trying to get to the end goal, which is to prevent future injuries and to manage that injury adequately as well. Okay, so we have a first task, right, when we begin the interviewing process, right, and we need to determine who's going to be interviewed. I'm at the bottom of page 13.4, folks, bottom left. Questions, they're going to need to be personalized for each person being interviewed. Interviews should occur right as soon as possible, but they usually don't begin until, like we said, things settle down and the injured is taken away or the ill is taken away. So some people who we may want to consider an interview, and who, first of all, the injured worker, right? Let's determine the specific events, right, that led up to the incident or to the negative impact. Also, co-workers, right? Let's find out if appropriate procedures are being followed. Let's find out what they knew, right? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you taste? What did you smell? Just on and on, right? Especially falling back to the senses. First line supervisors also get the background information right on the worker, the task they were doing, the job they were doing. Can he or she provide procedure information, right, about the task or how it's being performed? Project manager. This person can be the main source of information on related systems sometimes. Maintenance workers, right? Determining background on equipment and other machinery. So they may wind up being one of our subject matter experts or something to that effect, right? If they're qualified, they know, and maybe they knew what was going on with that work process. Emergency responders, right? Learn what they saw when they arrived, right? What did they notice? Yes, it was after the event, but let's go ahead and try to figure out and see what they know. Also, any type of medical personnel, EMTs, first aid, medical, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, any of them, okay? Also, the coroner, if there was a fatality, let's find out what the coroner said. Chances are they're not going to give us an answer right away. They may even hold and pause as long as they possibly can, and still not want to give us the information. And then, of course, we want to interview police and then the injured worker's family possibly also, right? If we think that person might have had a health condition that triggered the injury, or maybe that led to the significant injury, or it was non-work related, and we're trying to determine if it was work related. Okay, so family often gives us, had the employee, let's say if he's driving and there was a significant wreck, we want to know, had the employee been sleeping adequately at night? Did the employee have sleep apnea, right? Did they have a sleeping disorder? Is there any stressors going on in their life where maybe the employee wasn't getting sufficient sleep, right? Or broken sleep. So, difference of work schedule, working a second job, whatever the case may be. Okay. And then, what do we want? We need cooperation, right? We need all parties to cooperate. And that's going to be the key to whether this, to whether this investigation is going to be successful or not, and if it's going to bear fruit. We need everybody to be forthcoming, honest, non-intimidated, non-biased. Okay, so and we have to ask appropriate questions, and also open-ended questions as opposed to closed-ended questions. So also down below, right, 13.4 at the bottom. There's a list of effective interviewing techniques. They're going to help us. So let's go ahead and run through this list. When interviewing, keep the purpose of the investigation in mind, right? And in project management, you call this scope, keeping it within the scope, right? Don't let it creep out. So basically, trying to keep within the parameters of the investigation, right? You're attempting to determine the cause of the accident, okay? So that similar accidents don't occur. So let's make sure that the interviewer understands why we're doing the investigation. Also, approach the investigation with an open mind. It's going to be obvious, right, if we have preconceived notions or perceptions about the individual or the facts or the group or the task. Um, Go to the scene, right? Try to visit the site or the scene. Just because you're familiar with the location and the victim's job, we don't want to assume, how things happen, right? We want to be able to possibly go there, if at all possible, and have them walk us through and basically give us a visual, see if there's any other evidence that still remains. Interview everybody that's involved, including the injured workers, witnesses, people involved with the process. Witnesses should be interviewed separately, right? Never as a group. It's not to trick them, but we don't want one, somebody say, oh yeah, well, he was on a ladder and he was using an A-frame ladder, like a straight ladder. Oh no, he wasn't. No, you remember we told him not to, or he had it pinned against the door frame. No, it was on the wall, right? So, let's keep them separate. Let's keep them separate. That way we'll put together all the information and then we'll start figuring out who has a better recollection, who's appropriate or correct or accurate, whether it's intentionally or non-intentionally, right? Also, put the person at ease, right? Explain the purpose of investigation, why we want to prevent these incidents in the future. We're not trying to get somebody in trouble, right? Not only that, we may find out that the employees need more medical attention and or maybe more safety training. Also, let the individual talk. Let them talk as much as possible. Let them get their background out, right? The background of their job, their personal background, right? And ask witnesses to tell you what happened, but don't ask leading questions, right? Don't interrupt answers. Make facial expressions. So we want to go in there with an open mind and let them tell us instead of us telling them or suggesting. Okay. Open, like we said, ask open-ended questions. We talked about that already. Perfect examples, right? Don't ask why, because let me rephrase it. Let me go back. Try to avoid yes and no, right, type answers, right? Don't ask why, because they're types of questions that tend to make people respond differently, right? But this is things we can do, right? Not just why. We want to be a little bit more specific, right? So things don't ask. Why did you drive the forklift with underinflated tires? Instead ask this. What are the forklift inspection procedures, right? What are the forklift hazards, right? Reporting procedures, okay? Okay, so the tires weren't adequately inflated. You can ask something like this. Why was he still, so you were aware that the tires weren't inflated correctly? Sure. Okay, why did y'all still have to use it? What was the importance and significance of using it when you knew that the tires weren't adequately inflated? And then they may tell you, usually it's deadline, right? Supervisor said it. They didn't want to get in trouble or whatever the case. They're lazy, whatever the question is, right? Whatever the case is. Repeat the facts, right, and sequence of events back to the person to avoid any misunderstanding. Okay, so you said Jim got to work at 9:15 and he was 9:20. He was about 5 minutes late after break. Yeah. Okay. Good. So it was 5 minutes late after break. Okay, and you said that Jim, the first thing he did was went ahead and cranked up the chop saw. Yeah. Okay. All right. So tell me what else he did, and then you keep him going, right? Repeat the facts in the sequence like we just said. Take notes carefully, right? And casually, as possible, right? Try not to be too aggressive about it. Let the individual read them if they want to, just to make sure that it's accurate. Also, there's nothing wrong with writing it in a statement and having them read it and either correcting it or writing it and reading it and signing it afterwards, regardless. Whether it's correct or not, let them do the corrections or they feel it's correct, just let them sign it and date it as well. Ask for suggestions, right, as how the accident or incident could have been avoided. So that forklift you said had underinflated tires. How could we fix that problem? How in the future, when we know that we could have possible tire issues with a forklift, what can we do? Usually it's bringing the right tool, the right equipment, the right training into place, right? Ask for suggestions, like we said, how it can not have been occurred, and then conclude the interview with a statement of appreciation, right? Hey, we want to thank you, right? Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. If possible, advise the people to Advise the people personally of the outcome, right, or the investigation before it becomes public. Maybe going back to a group and say, hey, y'all, look, we determined that the forklift flipped because it exceeded the fulcrum point, the balance point, and it was all related to a pothole and to that sinkhole that you saw that was developed. It seems like y'all rolled over and it kind of sunk into the ground. Okay, and then that way they don't have to hear it on the street first, basically, or whatever you want to call it on a job site, right? Okay. And then accident investigations and reports. What are we doing with that? We want them documented, right? If it's not written, folks, it didn't happen. Okay. So we definitely want job reports written. We want good investigation to make sure that way we can reveal whatever contributing factors that we can determine that may have played a significant role in these injuries or illnesses or fatality. Also, the accident investigator should avoid blaming injured workers, right? Even if the worker admits the blame. It's not about people taking the blame, and the company may want to determine who's at fault or who's at blame. Most important thing for us is we don't want it to happen again. Okay. So there may be some issues there for liability. There may be some issues there for discipline. But bottom line, folks, that's not our determination to make. Let's just get the facts. They may ask for opinion. They may not. I tell everybody, if they ask for our opinion, give it. If they don't ask for it, don't offer it. Okay. So unless you think for some reason that your investigation is not going adequately, and then at that point you may want to talk to a supervisor, and you may or may not have to give your opinion. Okay. Also, other uses of other uses of accident investigation reports. I didn't know if I was going to get that out, y'all. The primary purpose of the accident investigations, like we said, is prevent future incidents, right, or accidents. Okay, the information that we obtain through the investigation, we should be used to update and revise the inventory of hazards, right, or basically our SOPs, standard operating procedures, our JSAs, our job hazard analysis, job safety analysis, so that we can go ahead and hopefully prevent those injuries. We may determine that we need training, period, more adequate training, more detailed training, right? More time added to the project, different equipment, tools, materials. So there's so many different reasons that may be determined, and we may or may not be the ones determining the reason, folks. Our job may be to furnish the information, and then maybe a committee of supervision and leaders, or people that are above our that are seniors to us. They may be the ones determining it. We may not even be the ones that are determining the issue. Okay. So, and then if you look at the bottom, there's just an example, right, of employee that basically went ahead and got hit by a vehicle when they were moving some lumber piles, and basically, what are we doing? That's what we're looking at, right? Is was this person the flagger? If they weren't the flagger, who were they? Why were they there? Was there a flagger? If there was a flagger, did they not notice the person? Did the person still travel in the path? Did the forklift operator not want to stop? What was the intended path of the traveler on foot? What was the intended path of of the forklift? So these are all questions and all data that we're going to want to put. And then we may even go ahead and use the initials DNA or NA, right? Does not apply, or NA for non-applicable. Okay. So we may do one or the other, folks. Take a quick peek right now at pages 13.87 and 13.8. Just read through 13.7. I'll give you the next 2 or 3 minutes to look at 13.7, an accident investigative report, and then you'll look at 13.9 right behind it, 13.8 behind it, which is the incident and injury report by OSHA. I'm going to give you this. What we're going to do. It's 7:22. Go ahead and read it for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'm going to just pause the mic for a moment, and then we'll go ahead and crank it back out. Okay. That way, I'll give you a few minutes just to read through it. Thank you. Alrighty, folks, let's go ahead and talk about it, okay? As you notice, the accident investigative form on page 13.7, that might be like an example of our corporate one. Our workers' comp company might give us one, our general liability, Okay, usually it may be the clients. Let's say if we work for Valero, right? Might be the Valero form, but yet we're called Doug Castro and Associates, and we do tank cleaning or something. So just an example, right? And as you notice, look at the information that they're asking for, right? Who's involved, right? The employee number, their name, date of birth, hire, the state where they were hired, their occupation, right? Basically their position, what they did. Maybe their social security number, maybe not. Their job number, or maybe the job details, pay rate. Sometimes not, depending on the company. Sometimes I want to put that or not. I'm going to show you on the next page what's mandatory. Um, what time the work shift began, what time it was scheduled to end, right? Was the employee drug tested, or are they planning on being tested? Who paid for it also, right? Was it the insurance company? Was it the client? Was it us? Was it dependent, right? Who paid for the drug testing, right? And then also description of the injury or illness, and then it'll go in also complete the section only if the incident resulted in an injury. It'll go through and maybe ask us who the physician was, where the physician's located, was there a return to work, right, or light duty or restricted issue. So if you look at, I do want to explain this, right? We often hear the terms lost time, and I think I kind of explained them last week. I'll kind of explain it again. A work restriction or a lost time or days away. Days away is easy. The employee, you never count the day of the injury, illness, or fatality, okay? Tomorrow is always day one. So if the doctor or the company, not the employee's opinion, but the doctor or the company determined that the employee should not come to work tomorrow, that's a day away, okay? If the employee's is told to go to work but not work a full day, that's a restriction. All right. If the employee is told to, let's say the employee, if you look down, it's got all those descriptions, right? Lifting, stooping, bending, kneeling, climbing, reaching, use of the left, right upper side, the right upper side, whatever, standing, whatever the case is. If any of those are job requirements of the employee and they can't do even at least one of them, that's also considered a job restriction. Okay. Or if a doctor says, I don't want you picking above 50 pounds, I don't want you on your feet for more than 4 hours a day, but the employee's on their feet 8 hours a day. Those are all job restrictions. Okay. And then ultimately a transfer is we put them in a different department. Where do we put them? They were a scaffold builder. Now they go to the safety department, right? They were a millwright. Now they go to the purchasing department, right? We usually tend to put them in human resources, safety, purchasing, somewhere where, just filing, whatever the case is, right? So, anytime that information is noticed, it'll be considered a restricted activity. And then supervisor information, right? Basically, who was overseeing this employee at the time. And then it'll get into either insurance information or it'll get into corporate information. This is one thing I'll tell you, folks. Injury records like this, don't share this information, please. Take this information. The only people that you should be discussing this with are people who are helping manage the case, or the employer. Our employer has given us a responsibility to share, and they have a part of the investigative process. All right, we don't share it with coworkers, brothers, sisters, mothers, wives, husbands, whatever. Remember, this is people's medical privacy. Okay, the only people who have a right to that incident form and the next page, OSHA 301 form, is the ill, the injured, or representative of the ill, injured, or deceased. Basically, it could be a union rep, could be a family member, could be a doctor, could be an attorney, or anyone else that person or the next of kin assigns as the rep. Okay. And then if you look at the next page, you'll see the OSHA 301 form, 301. Folks, I teach the OSHA 301 form. I'm going to show you. Let me show you where it is right now, because I do want you to download this or get it from the internet and review it between now and next Tuesday, since we're going to go into reporting. Okay. So let me go to Google first. It's called OSHA 300, and you type in PDF, and it's right here. It's this 12-page booklet. Okay. You can save it as a PDF right here, this log right here. And what it is, folks, is, and I would ask you this, right? If you can just read it, no, try to do it if you want, but I mean, just read it. We're going to get into it pretty heavily next Tuesday. OSHA 300 log, right? The first page right here, 2, 3, and 4, is all the instructions on what's recordable, what's not recordable, how to classify injuries, how to count days away, restrictions and transfers. And then it even shows us how to calculate incident rates. I'll be showing you that as well. I'm going to have one that's populated already for you, okay? How to fill out the log. There's your instructions. I'm going to show you a log that we fill out that I do in the OSHA record keeping class that I teach, the 4-hour record keeping class. Here's an example of the blank log. And like I said, I'm going to show you an example of a filled out log. It'll look just a little bit different. The OSHA, the summary, right, of work-related injuries. This is the annual summary that you often see at your work, posted all of February, all of March, all of April. It should be posted right now from February 1 to April 30th. And then also, this is just another worksheet on how to calculate man hours, okay, in order to get average number of employees. I'll kind of show you how that works. There's your 301 form that you're looking at right now in the book under 13.8, okay? And then 2 pages for help and information and who to contact with any questions, okay? The 3 things I want to show you primarily are this. This is the OSHA 300 log. This log maintains everyone's injuries. We'll walk through this next week, okay? It'll have a case number if it's recordable, the employee's name, the job title, the date they were injured, a brief description of where it happened or where they work, a brief description of what happened, and then we'll get into determining what the most severe of a death, days away, job restrictions, or any other recordable case would happen. We'll count days, we'll count lost time, days away, and then restricted or transferred. And then we'll also count, go ahead and check off the reason for the injury as well, or illness as well, the classification. Okay, so if you look at your OSHA 301 form, if it goes beyond first aid and it's an actual recordable, the OSHA 301 form, if you look at number 10, it says case log number. That case log number would be this number here in column A. Okay, so like I said, this will make a whole lot more sense next week because I'm going to teach us off of the booklet as well next week, and that'll kind of help everybody out. And I'm gonna have one that's populated, give you some good ideas about it. All right, and I will tell you this, folks. Anybody, watch your schedules in your cities. I don't know about Lake Charles. I don't know about Orlando out there, but like as far as Texas and Louisiana, more like Shreveport. I'm sorry, not Shreveport. Lafayette, Baton Rouge, or New Orleans, and then Houston, Arlington, Austin, San Antonio. The University of Texas does training classes, grant classes. There are a couple free days. So does Texas A&M TEACS, and then so does Mid-South. Okay, within our region. We have a course here in New Orleans, folks, just so you know, everybody will be getting an email on this in the next couple of weeks. It is for the April 27th. We're going to have a 4-hour class on this 12-page booklet and a PowerPoint that's going to go along with it. It's a 4-day class. It's a 4-hour class. It's called the OSHA 7845. It's going to be a free class. It's on a grant day, and it's going to be, I'll give you the date right now. It's going to be Monday. I think it's the 24th. Let me see. Monday 24th, right here where you see that 7845. We're going to have an 8 a.m. to noon session, a 1 p.m. to 5 session. They'll both be free, and it'll come with an OSHA certificate as well. Okay, so I'll get you up to speed on that as we get closer. Registration won't even open until the week before. Okay, anybody, I know not everybody's in the greater New Orleans area, but I just want to let you know it's there. But we're going to cover a good bit of it next week. Okay, all right. So this is the OSHA 301 form, folks. It's basically it's a trick question. Anytime I ask people, hey, okay, has anybody filled out an OSHA 301 form before, right? Usually most people know what the log is, which let me go back to the log. Just give me 1 second. Let's see. Okay, so most people know what the log is, right? Maybe this. More people know what the annual summary is because this is what our employer posts in our workplace. And then when I ask about the 301 form, most people don't know what it is. All it is OSHA's mandated injury and illness report form, okay? But also when you read this booklet, folks, you'll see that it says that we can use this report, right? Or we can use a report that's got at least all the same information that you find included on this form, okay? I do want to tell you this, that this form mandates that the contact information right there that you see on the form, it's numbered 1 through 5. That contact information that you see there must be the contact information for the employee. Okay, we cannot put the workplace address, we cannot put the workplace phone number. It's got to be the contact information for the employee. So if that employee no longer works at this company, so that we can get a hold of them, OSHA can get a hold of them, right? Any other government agency can get a hold of them if necessary. So therefore, those sections right there, 2, 3, basically 2, 3. We want, and then you should have a phone number in there really too. Needs to be the information of the employee themselves. Okay, so like I said, that's your incident report. You do not have to use the OSHA form, but you have to have, if you have your own form, it can be an insurance form. It can be just like on page 13.7. Okay, it could be an insurance form, a workers' comp form, but it's got to have at least the minimum that the information that this 301 form has on it or more. It can have more, but it can't have any less. Okay. All right, folks. Well, let's do this. So that's 13.8, right? That was 13.8. And then as you can tell, we're at 13.9, right? There you see your questions again for the end of this module. So let's go ahead and break. It's about pretty much where I thought it was. We're at 7:36 right now. So I say let's take a 14-minute break. We'll kick it back up at 10 minutes to 8. We're going to go ahead and push through the next module. And we're probably going to, like I said, we're probably going to wrap up just a little early tonight. On Tuesday, like I said, we'll go ahead and push through. Next Tuesday, we're going to push through record keeping. And then we're also going to try, and depending on how much time record keeping, because it is pretty intensive, we're going to try to get through the OSHA inspection procedures as well. Okay, so 15 and 16. All right, folks. So great. Let's go ahead and pause. I'll see you 14 minutes. So 7:51. Okay, and we'll go ahead and crank it back up, folks. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Okay, so we are back in. Okay, we are going to go ahead and just give me 1 second. We'll go ahead and get it rolling. Just so everybody knows where we're going to be, folks. This is where we are. Okay, we're going to be at 75 214 14.1, and which is going to be the second half of this now, which is accident investigation and data analysis. Okay, so now we've collected the evidence, right? We've collected the information, all the data that we need, that we've been able to collect. So now what we're going to do, we're going to start doing some analyzing to this. Okay. So let's talk about it a little bit first, right? So as far as 1.0.0, it's going to be absolutely important to analyze this investigation, all the data that we collected, in order to discover why accidents happen or an incident happened, right? Once we know how it happened, okay, and why it happened, and then we can start correcting issues. We can start taking corrective measures in order to help prevent future incidents, right, and accidents as well. So, in the previous model, what did we do, right? We learned how to conduct that accident investigation, right? Well, in this module now, we're going to learn how to analyze that information. We're going to take that data and we're going to start putting it into some type of logical format and understandable format. So, and this data analysis, it definitely does take some special skills, right? As a safety technician, we're going to find that we have the ability to analyze data, right? It's going to be helpful in other areas of our work as well. And this data is going to require us to proceed to follow a process of information, right, in a logical way. The thing is, we often think about things in a chronological order, right? Basically from step 1 to step 50, let's say, right? The day started at 9 a.m. and then the injury occurred at 6 p.m. Well, that might not be how we do it. We may start with the injury. We may go ahead and roll into the response, and then we may start giving some background as to what happened. Okay, so that's a perfect example how it may, instead of being chronological, it may wind up being in a logical order. Because the most important thing is this: although chronological is important, it needs to be logical. It needs to be understandable, and we need to know, basically, be able to put it in easy format in order to hopefully easily keep up with it, or as best keep up with it. Okay, so because every accident and every incident is different, right? We're going to take different approaches while we're taking on the challenge of analyzing this data. So we're going to find that one approach is better or easier than the other, depending on the situation, right? Sometimes we may combine approaches also, because ultimately, what are we doing? We're trying to get to the same result, right? We're trying to get to the same end objective, which is finding out what caused this mishap? What caused this incident, this injury, this fatality, this accident, whatever you want to, whichever one we're going to brand it as, right? So what are the methods? Okay, there are going to be three of them, right? First of all, the three levels of accident causation model. That's going to be one that we're going to talk about. The second one is the why method. Okay, um, excuse me, four of them. The sequence of events, right? Why method, and then also OSHA's problem solving techniques. So let's go ahead and talk about the three levels of accident causation model, right? That the causes, basically this model, basically what it says is that accidents or incidents, they can be classified into three different factors. They can be direct causes, indirect causes, and root causes. Okay, so they're also called three levels of accident causation. Each level of causation is going to represent one of a few factors, right? So it's going to definitely be important to clearly recognize and understand the components, right, at all three levels in order to analyze the accident data, right? If we want to understand what causes accidents, we're going to be able to identify the causes when we're going to review the information, right, or the forms, the witness statements, any physical accidents. So starting at 14.2, let me, let's talk about level one, right? Level one, what are we talking about? It represents direct causes of accidents, right? So those causes of accidents are going to involve the uncontrolled release of energy, right? Basically, a lockout tagout that failed, basically, is what we're talking about, right? It was an unexpected control of release of energy. The accidents may or may not cause injury or property damage, but they're still going to be dangerous. So when we're investigating an accident, we have to be sure to closely look at energy sources, right, that might have been released. So what are we talking about, right? What type of examples of accidents of uncontrolled releases of energy? We're talking about being struck by an object or an equipment. We're talking about being caught between two objects, being struck by debris during the detonation of some type of explosive, being cut or scraped by a bladed tool. All those are types of accidents that are preventable if the equipment's properly maintained and workers follow established guidelines, right? So, one thing you'll see is that NCCER and a lot of the craft training that they do, they drill down, right? They really drill down on proper maintenance of equipment and the employees following established safety guidelines. Okay, so I'm going to take it a step further, folks, right? We're talking about established safety guidelines. So what are we talking about? We're talking about our health and safety plan, right? We're talking about our client's health and safety plan. Let's say if we're working for a Shell, a Motiva, right? We're talking about, ours as Doug Castro Enterprises. We're talking about following our clients, Shells, right? Or if we're working for JV Industries, let's say JVs and then Shells, if JV is the general. Also, it's following the OSHA standards and OSHA guidelines, right? Center for Disease Control, OSHA, following those guidelines as well. And then on top of that, following every manufacturer. So let's say if all of a sudden we're using a bladed tool, right? Let's say if we're using an Irwin knife and we didn't properly use it the way it's intended to be used, well, we violated those guidelines, right? Or if it's let's say if it's a wet saw and it's a Makita wet saw, and or a Bosch wet saw and we didn't appropriately use it, well, we violated Makita or Bosch's wet saw programming guidelines. Okay, so just to give you an example of how many different guidelines we can potentially be violating. Level two, it's going to represent is indirect causes of the accidents, right? So what are we talking about when we're talking about indirect causes? We're going to be talking about factors that contributed, right, to an accident but aren't the main cause. So indirect causes, they usually involve unsafe acts or unsafe conditions. A lot of times you'll hear us call them, nowadays we're not even calling them unsafe anymore, we're calling them at risk, right? At risk conditions, at risk acts. That in the past, investigators looked at only as indirect causes of accidents, not the reason behind the unsafe act or the condition. So it proved to be ineffective because why? Because indirect causes, they're often just a symptom, right, of a greater problem. So, but they're not the actual cause. So let's talk about let's talk about at-risk acts and at-risk conditions or unsafe acts or unsafe conditions, whichever ones you want to call it, right? First of all, it's important to be able to recognize when a worker's behavior is at risk. So here's a list of the most common at-risk behaviors found on a job site, right? Failing to use PPE correctly, either use it at all or correctly use it. Failing to warn Co-workers, right, of potentially hazardous conditions or unsafe behaviors, maybe assuming that other employees know, maybe not caring whether they know, right, forgetting to tell them, failing to follow instructions and procedures. Like I said, whose instructions and procedures? Our corporate ones, our clients' corporate ones, the manufacturers of any type of chemical, tool, piece of equipment that we use. Um, Also, using defective equipment, right? Maybe we may have a chop saw that's got, let's say, a broken guard on it, right? Or we may be using a grinding disc that's already starting to fail. Lifting improperly, also ergonomics, right? Taking an improper work position, again, ergonomics, right? Making safety devices inoperable. So now we're trying to jump out safety devices, or beat guards and beat safety devices, right? Operating equipment without authority. Maybe we're not authorized to use a come along, right? Or we're not authorized to use an impact gun, a pneumatic, not a pneumatic, excuse me, a powder actuated ramset gun, right? So anybody who's not familiar with what I'm talking about when I'm talking about powder actuated ramset, let me bring it to you, okay? This is what I'm talking about. Employees have to have an additional certification by the employer. They have to be specially trained to use a ramset gun. You know why? Because look what it looks like. It looks like a gun, right? It's got a firing mechanism in it. It's got a nozzle on it. Okay, it's got a barrel. Okay, some of them have a trigger. Some of them you hit with a hammer on the back, and it's got a nail. What's the nail? The nail's a projectile, right? So what is it ultimately? It's a gun. Okay, that's why it looks like a gun, right? So you have all these that look like guns, and then you'll also have the ones that you'll hit on the back of the butt. Let me see. I think I see one right there. Let's see. Here you go, right here. This one you hold down, you put your palm of your hand here, and then you can nail into a wall surface or into the floor surface. Okay, so just different ones, and then there's a really inexpensive one that you use with a hammer, and you basically are pushing it down. Here you go, right here. Okay, and what happens is you're hitting this nut here that's got a shaft that goes through it that hits the firing pin that shoots it into the wall. So we may be shooting it into the wall, or we may be shooting it into the ground. Okay, and it depends, right? We need to make sure we use the right size nail, then the right caliber 22 shell, depending on what surface that we're going to go into. Here goes an example. Here's all your levels of shells right here. Okay, depending on what we're going to be nailing into. Okay, so that's just an example where, like I said, maybe the employee wasn't authorized to use that piece of equipment, right? Um, Also, in addition to that, servicing equipment while it's in motion or energized. Perfect example is, let's say, a grinding disc, right? An employee turns around and either one or two things. Let's say a pneumatic. A pneumatic nail gun, right? And all of a sudden it gets jammed up. And what happens? We start opening it up, and we maybe have a nail that's jammed or something, and we don't take off the air hose, and it's still energized with air. All of a sudden we open up the cap to go ahead and remove the nail out, and we may incidentally fire that pin out, that projectile out. Okay, there's an example of perfect example of what we're talking about right now. Or let's say a grinder, right? Let's say an angle grinder, and all of a sudden we're trying to change the disc on it, right? Replace the disc on an angle grinder, but we don't disconnect power. All of a sudden we inadvertently hit the power switch, and now it starts hopping around, skipping, jumping on us, and everything else. Okay, so that's just an example of two of them right there. And then loading or placing the equipment or supplies improperly in a dangerous way, right? We may have equipment or materials that we store somewhere where they may get dislodged or fall or move, or get energized, and they may harm an employee or a series of employees. Using equipment improperly also, right? Using the wrong tool for the wrong type of equipment, right? Working while impaired under drugs or alcohol, perfect example as well. And then engaging in horseplay, all reasons that would be unsafe acts, right, or at-risk acts that we have. Unsafe condition, right, or at-risk condition would be things like a congested workplace, defective tools, equipment, and supplies, excessive noise, fire and explosion hazards, okay? Um, Hazardous atmospheric conditions, gases, dust, vapors, fumes, inadequate supports or guards, inadequate warning systems, poor housekeeping, poor illumination, poor ventilation. Okay, so a lot of accidents, right, are caused by, at-risk acts and conditions, right? OSHA and NIOSH, they did a study, and I believe ASSE, they did a study a few years ago, said that 78 to 79% of all injuries came from an unsafe or at-risk act and not necessarily a condition. And I'll give you an example why, folks, also, is if you look at all your unsafe conditions or acts, those are all conditions, of acts. All of those acts will always be behavioral based, right? So hence the whole behavioral based safety training that we do, observation cards, all that. But the conditions that you see on the right-hand side on page 14.3, often the conditions start out as a condition, but they can convert to they can also wind up converting to an unsafe act. So let me give you an example, right? Is, let's say, inadequate supports or guards. We have a piece of equipment where the guard broke. Well, once we know it's broken, we actually opt to continue using that piece of equipment. Now we have to ask ourselves, is it a condition still, or is it now becoming behavior, right? An act. Many employers now, many larger organizations are saying that when we don't identify an unsafe condition, or we identify it and we opt not to do anything about it, that now it becomes an unsafe act, as opposed to an unsafe condition. Okay, so just perfect example. So often what happens, folks, is conditions can turn into acts. Okay, but acts are not going to turn into conditions. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's keep on going now. Okay. So let's talk about level 3. Give me 1 second. We're going to go and crank out level 3. Okay, so let's talk about level 3 inspections, right? And then what are we talking about now? Now we're going to be talking about the root causes of accidents, right? So the root cause, or the basic causes of accidents, and what's the underlying reasons an accident happened. Root causes, they don't only affect a single accident being investigated, they also affect future accidents, right, and work problems as well. So, once a root cause is fixed, the type of accidents that occurred because of it should not happen. In theory, won't happen again, right? It shouldn't happen again if we fix that root cause. Root causes should also be corrected as soon as it's practical to correct them. Um, this a perfect example, right? It often takes time because new procedures, they may have to be written, they might have to be implemented, they may have to be reviewed and tweaked and approved, right? And then also new equipment training also might be required. So a lot of times, if it's a root cause like that, it'll take a little bit of time to get straight. Okay. Um, so in addition to that, it's also think about immediate temporary controls, right, or ITCs, as NCCR calls them. They should be implemented until the root cause can be implemented, right? So it may be a temporary practice, or it may be a temporary procedure that we're following, all right, our temporary guard we put in place, right, until we can come out with a SOP, a standard operative procedure, or a new process, right, a new documented process on how we're going to do the work. Also, the why method, right? What's the why method in an accident investigation? It's just going to basically include continue asking why, right? Why did this happen? The investigating until the question why, it can no longer be answered, right? So the line of questioning, it might take us down different paths or several paths, right? So each of which are going to lead to one or more basic root causes. So we have a better, and that way we'll be able to correct problems, okay, and create safe work environments, right? So the why method, it can be enhanced by combining it with the sequence of events method, and we're about to talk about the sequence of event method. Its combined methodology is called the sequence of events, the why method. So basically, it's a combo, right, between both. It's a combo between both methods. And then the sequence of events method. Let's go ahead and talk about it, right? See, sequence of events method, it's why methods. If a systematic method is objectively identified, to root causes or unsafe acts, conditions, and incidents, right? So it involves identifying the sequence of events that are going to lead to that unsafe act or that condition that are going to get us to the information that we're trying to obtain. The following steps are used for sequence of events method, right? So there are 4 steps. So let's go through the 4 steps. First of all, we're going to identify the actual potential injury, right? The damage, the near miss, right? Basically what happened, right? Why are we doing this investigation? Second of all, we're going to ask, why did the situation occur? Third step, we're going to work backwards in time, asking why, right? Until we can no longer ask why. Or we reach some type of dead end. So we're going to identify events leading up to incidents, right? So preceding events, they can take 1 or 2 forms. They can be something that happened that should not have happened, or they can be something that happened but it should have happened, right? So those are 2 perfect examples. So let's use an example here. Let's say a laborer in a construction site was told to clean up on the 3rd floor of a building, right? Let's say that laborer specifically told to pick up all the boards and scrap lumber. When the laborer got to the 3rd floor, he finds a pile of trash, let's say, right? And scrap lumber covering a 4x8 piece of plywood. Well, he picks up all the loose pieces of wood and the trash, and he puts them down a trash chute. And then he proceeds to pick up the plywood. When he picks up the plywood, right, and held it in front of him, it obstructed his view, right? So what winds up happening? He stepped forward, he fell through the hole. The plywood wasn't there as scrap. The plywood was there basically as a floor covering, right? Covering that opening is what it was there for. So what happens? The employee falls. In this situation, the employee fell 12 feet, right? Basically to the next lower surface, to the 2nd floor, suffers serious back and hip injuries, right? Okay. So if you look at 14.4, we're going to run through some examples, right? So if you see if you look at it, that's a perfect example of the sequence of why method, right? If you look at figure 2 on root causes, look at what normally root causes are. Let's start at the top, right? Let's talk about the direct cause first, right? We talked about direct cause, then we talked about surface causes or behaviors and conditions, and then the root causes, right? So look at the surface, look at direct, right? Cuts, bruises, strains, okay? Lacerations could also be another one, right? Poison and items like that, right? Well, what often causes those accidents? It could be unguarded machines, it could be broken tools, defective tools, chemical spills, defective PPE, workers that aren't adequately trained. We don't make enough time for the job, right, or to train. Too much work, right? The workload's too much or too demanding. Horseplay, maybe something that creates a hazard. Maybe we ignore a hazard. Um, we failed to report an injury. We failed to do an inspection or to enforce good job requirements, and all the way down to fail to train, right? So there's all your surface causes of the accident. And then look at your root causes: inadequate training, right? No discipline procedure, no orientation process, inadequate training plan, no accountability policy, right? So no recognition, inadequately labeling procedures, outdated procedures, no recognition plan, and no inspection policy. So what's it normally break down to on a root cause? Most root cause is a failure, right, to have a certain procedure or a certain plan or policy in place, or adequate training. Okay, so this is one of the only reasons why I'm not big on root cause. You got different root cause programs out there, great programs, right? I'm just not really big on it because it's always going to come down to one of a few things. We either didn't have or we failed to follow a policy, procedure, or a plan, right? Or we didn't implement adequate training and assure that we had maintained adequate training. What happens? It leads to unsafe conditions of behavior, right? Ultimately leads to direct causes of injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. Okay, so that's just a perfect example, right? So let's talk about the following sequence, right, of events, regarding the accident. This accident was determined by using a sequence of events method, right? So accident event. What are we talking about? All right. So now I'm going back to where we were originally, right? So the laborer fell through the unlabeled floor opening, right? So the first preceding event, another contractor's temporary employee covered the hole, right? But they failed to label it with the word hole or cover, right? Or opening on top of it, right? Which is mandated by OSHA, so they violated the standard. Second preceding event, the temporary contractor employee had been on the job only 2 days, right? Had no knowledge of the OSHA requirements to label it whole opening or cover, right? So and received no specific instructions from the supervisor, right? So basically, the employee didn't have the job experience or the knowledge of the standard that it's a requirement, and the supervisor obviously either didn't advise them or missed it, right? And then, other than the employer just tells them to cover up the hole, the supervisor. What's the root cause? The accident was caused by a lack of training and insufficient, right, instructions to the temporary worker. Exactly what we were just talking about, right? What happened? Lack of supervision, training, right, instructions. So we failed the process, we failed the plan, we failed the policy, and ultimately what happened is it was a lack of or inadequate training, right? Okay. And then let's talk about OSHA's problem solving techniques. OSHA's problem solving techniques, OSHA documents thousands of accidents, right, that occur daily throughout the United States, throughout different regions in our country. They result from the failure from employees or people, right? Equipment, supplies, or any other surroundings to behave as expected. So accidents represent problems, right, that have to be solved through the investigations. So a successful accident investigation, what's going to do is it determines not only what happened, but it's also going to find out how and why it occurred. So basically, formal problem solving is a technique that we can use to solve problems, right, of any degree or any complexity. Some of them may take longer than others, right, but we should be able to get to some type of solution or resolution. And then the section discusses two of the most common used procedures suggested by OSHA, right, to analyze the data. So change analysis and job safety analysis. So let's talk about change analysis, right? And then we're going to talk about the job safety analysis as well. So change analysis, what are we looking at? Well, look what its name is implying, right? It's a change analysis technique, right? It emphasizes change, right? So basically, let's say in terms of an accident problem solving, we have to look at the deviations from the norm. Okay, so in order to do this, basically all situations, especially those accidents or incidents, right, any mishaps that have resulted in any type of anticipated change, should carefully be identified and analyzed. We need to analyze working conditions and also behaviors that would be different from the usual conditions, right? So it could be something related to and identifying the cause of accident or incident. So maybe something related to abnormal conditions, right? Once we determine that was different or that the source of the change, right, corrective action should have been taken, we should have implemented certain steps, right, that we should have used during the change analysis method. So a lot of times you'll see it in oil and gas now and SEMS, and y'all might want to check this out too. Let me go to SEMS, right? SEMS, MOC, Management of Change. If anybody's not familiar with it. So let me go ahead and go to the Management of Change. A lot of times you hear it called MOC, okay, in the pipeline industry, and it's because we're following SEMS for offshore, right, and in the outer continental shelf in the Gulf, and then but they're also bringing it into the refineries as well. So if you go to, like I said, if you go to SEMS and you go to your MOC, you'll be able to you go for Bessie, right? Here's the government fact sheet on it. And it goes in and talks about different change systems on it, okay? Different levels of what needs to be followed, the protocol that needs to be followed. Basically, this is the best way I can put it, right? Is the left hand needs to know what the right hand's doing, the right hand needs to know what the right foot's doing, the right foot needs to know what the left foot's doing, the left foot needs to know what the head's doing, head needs to know what the neck's doing, and the neck's got to check back in with the left arm, right? So basically full circle You go back to it's almost like a full circle if you look at 14.2, right? Level 2 indirect causes, but it'd be a full circle, right? That basically all the processes and all the groups all know what everybody's doing. Okay. Um, so let me go back, right? Analyzing work conditions like we talked about, and corrective actions should have been taken, right? So the following steps are often used during the change analysis method. So let's talk about it, right? What are we going to do? We're going to define the problem, right? We want to know what happened. That's step one. First and foremost, we need to know what the problem is. We need to ask what happened. And then we got to establish a norm, right? What should have happened? What should have been done and what should have been the end result. Okay. There's our baseline, right? Our baseline is step two. And we're on page 14.5, okay, module 14 on the safety technology book. We also need to identify, locate, and describe the change. And then we need to specify what was and what was not affected, right? What was affected either by the lack of change, what was not affected by the lack of change, or what was affected or not affected by either the change or the lack of change, right? We need to identify the distinctive features of the change. What did it cause, right? Did it cause a ripple effect? Did it cause the one expectation to be different? We need to list the possible causes, and then we're going to select the most likely cause. Okay, so that's a change analysis, and then a job safety analysis, right? A JSA. Remember this, folks. Like I said a couple weeks ago and last week, the JSAs and JHAs, we tend to use those terms interchangeably, but a JHA, a job hazard analysis, right, or assessment, right, hazard assessment, or a job hazard assessment, a worksite hazard assessment, right, a task hazard assessment. That is done by the employer's representatives. That's done by competent persons, or that's done by third-party providers, okay, to go ahead and identify the hazards in the workplace, okay? That's a job hazard analysis or a task hazard analysis or a process hazard analysis. Once we've identified those hazards, and that's done by competent persons, and then we start putting in the controls in place, and we start putting the training and education in place, and the employees normally fill out a JSA, right? A TSA, task safety analysis, a job safety analysis, a PSA, a process safety analysis. A lot of times nowadays you'll hear JSEA in the oil and gas industry, meaning job safety and environmental analysis. Now we're saying we don't want any oil or hydrocarbons, right, on the ground or any into our plant life or wildlife or into our waterways. Okay, so job safety analysis, right? What is it? It's part of the existing accident prevention program, right? So basically or generally, JSA, it breaks the job into basic steps. Okay, and it's going to identify the hazards that are associated with each step. Also, that JSA is going to prescribe controls, right, for each hazard. So JSA is going to consist of a chart listing the certain steps, right? It's going to list the steps. Then it's going to list the potential hazards or hazards that we may encounter, and then the control that we should put in place. And the control may go all the way down to a stop work. Okay. We need to review those JSAs, right, during the investigation, right? And if the JSA has been conducted for the job that was involved in the accident, and then we need to find out if there was a fail in the JSA, right? A lot of times what happens, employees didn't do it, right? They pencil whipped it. I mean, this is what we often find. Perform the JSA, right? And, if not one, we need to perform the JSA if one's not available. To perform a JSA, right, as part of the investigation to determine the events of the sequences that led to the accident. So when we start noting, right, what the condition, what the hazardous condition was, what the steps were, the hazardous conditions, and then the controls, we'll probably find where it failed. Okay, because we're using both, right, the change analysis and then the job safety analysis, and that's why they kind of go hand in hand. So let me go back to the 7 steps of changes analysis, right? We're going to define the problem and what happened, right? 1. 2, we're going to establish the norm, what should have happened. Okay, perfect example of that is the steps, from the job safety analysis. Then we're going to identify, locate, and describe the change, right? We're going to specify, what was and what wasn't affected, right? That could possibly be the hazard. And then we're going to identify distinctive features of change. We're going to list possible causes, and then we're going to select the likely causes, right? And basically, that's what would have triggered our work control, right? Our engineering controls, our administrative controls, our PPE controls. So basically, do we have to put some type of engineering item in place, a guard, a wall, right? Some kind of barrier, barricade, administrative, keeping employees out of the work area, maybe authorized personnel only in training, and then of course PPE, right? Okay. And then let's talk about organizing and reporting the data, right? So an accident, I'm at 14.5, folks, 6.3.0. So an accident investigation, right? It's not complete until report's prepared. So it's not complete until we prepare the report, okay, and we submit it to the proper authorities. Who are the authorities? It depends, folks. It might be management, right, or through the chain of command within our own workplace. It may also be that we need to report it and issue it to government agencies or insurance companies or contractors and subcontractors. Okay, so just depending who the parties involved or the stakeholders, folks, right? Another project management word. Who's the stakeholders? Anybody who's got a vested interest, right? Ultimately, who's going to dictate who we give that information to? Our employer. Okay, it's our employer's responsibility to issue that to certain parties. But if our responsibility is to give it straight to the employer, that's what we're going to do. If our instructions are to share it with other groups, right, or other individuals, and then we may possibly be doing that as well. Also, so and then what we're going to do is that these reports, what they're going to do, they're going to help provide a thorough documentation, right, of an accident. And it's also going to help us create a structure for organizing accident data. So the information collected from a change analysis or from job safety analysis, it should also be used for accident investigation reports, right? So let's use the following outline, right? And we're going to use it to organize tools or information that we gather. So we're going to group it, and these are probably different things that we'll do, right? Background information. Where and when did the accident occur? Who and what were involved? Operating personnel and other witnesses as well, right? Normally, like I said, eyewitnesses, ear witnesses. This is what I tell people. Who's a witness? Somebody saw something, heard something, tasted something, smelled something, felt something. Okay, when I mean felt, I don't mean, it could be just intuition, right? Mental, but it's normally physical, like felt the vibration, felt the boom, felt the twist, right? A squeak, whatever the case is. In addition to that, also account of the accident, right? What happened? We want to know the sequence of events, extent of the damage, accident type, agency or the source, right? Like if there was an energy release or some type of hazardous chemical or material. Also, we want to have that discussion, right? We want to analyze how and why the accident happened. And look, we may just be flushing it out, y'all. This doesn't mean it's an official opinion at this point, right? We may be flushing it out as well, playing if and then, what and if, right? What if this would happen, or could it happen like this, right? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. So we may be flushing a lot of this out. Determining direct causes, right? Like energy sources or hazardous materials, indirect causes, like unsafe acts or behaviors, and also at-risk or unsafe conditions as well. And then basic causes like management policies, personnel factors, environmental factors could also be some reasons. And then also recommendations, right? What are recommendations for? It's things that we want to implement in order to prevent it from occurring again, right? And we don't want a short-term solution. We may have to do at the beginning. We may have to do a short, fast fix, but ultimately we want a permanent fix that's going to go ahead and reduce the risk or eliminate these hazards, right? So, and recommendations, right? For implementing long range actions, we're gonna base them off of basic causes, right? Indirect causes, direct causes, like reduced quantities, protective equipment, protective structures. Okay, so it's all examples of how we're going to go ahead and take those corrective actions, right? And then let's go ahead and close out the night. We're going to close it out with a trend analysis, right? So they're going to be one of many values in an incident investigation. Okay. when we do a trend analysis that can be studied after the investigation. So what are we talking about now? We're talking about lessons learned, right? We're talking about having this data, and basically we're analyzing the data, right? It's going to give us a much bigger and better picture of the accident, right? What caused the accident, uh, on what caused the accident. In addition to that, also, uh, we're going to do it so we can take appropriate actions, right? And then by using the completed accident and incident reports, we can go ahead and analyze the data by those factors, right? And then what factors can we organize the data by? Like we said, right? We want to do logical order, right? First and foremost, we want to put it all in a logical order, okay? But also, we may do start putting things in by timeline or time of day, right? The length of employment of that employee, the supervisor, the group, right? Are we new on the job? It could be the whole crew. Are we new on this job? Have we been there for quite some time? Are we towards the end of the job where reduction in force injuries might start showing up? Complacency, right? Um, what shift was it? Was it day, afternoon, night? Was it overtime? How many shifts had they been working? When's the last time employees had days off? Okay, we're going to take all that in consideration, right? Also, the length of time on the job. Like we said, it could be length of time for the day or length of time since they've been on that job. Who is the supervisor, right? Has the supervisor had any other significant injuries, illnesses, or near misses that have happened? And then on top of that, were they similar? Also, what type of supervision, right? Was it, is it a supervisor in the trailer all the time? Is a supervisor walking the field? Uh, basically, what type of supervision is out there? Also, the job classification. How's an employee classified? Are they a carpenter, right? Are they painting and coating, scaffolding, right? So classifying that job as well. And then what task was being performed at the time? We know, like we talked about last week and the week before and the week before that, focus four, right? The four greatest hazards in construction. Let me go back to it. So OSHA Focus 4, right, folks? Um, was it something that that involved a fall, right? An employee caught in under between a piece of equipment or a trench collapse or motorized mechanical equipment, atmospheric hazard. Was it something that somebody was struck by, right? A projectile, a biological agent, a chemical agent, okay, a bullet, a fist, right? And then electrocution hazards or electrical hazards as well. Also, the body part that was injured, right? Was it the face, an arm, a leg? I'll give you a perfect example. Compressed gas cylinders, Joe. So I worked on a project. This was a pipeline project, a pump facility actually, and this was about, I guess, about 5 or 6 years ago. And gas cylinders, right? It might be time to go, y'all. I'm having problems spelling tonight. So let's say gas cylinders like this, right? So what happened was we had before I got to this job site, employees had been injured. We had a growing pull and a finger smash, right? About 2 weeks before I got to this job, it was a 5-month hitch that I was on. Within the first month of being there, we had a second growing pull, or back pull, excuse me, and we had another finger smash. So my questions, I don't often have the answers, but what I do often have are the questions. Okay. So, I'm talking to the safety director. I went in to cover for one of the safety technicians or coordinators. And the safety director and I are riding around. He says, "Man, what you think's going on?" I said, "Well, man, you had two before I got here, right? And within another 3 weeks, you had two more, and basically two muscle pulls, one growing, one back, and then two finger smashes." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "What do you think?" I said, "I don't know." Well, it was in the dead of summer, right? So it could have been poor decision making, rushing the job, okay, aggravation, right? Also, they had some older dollies. I said, maybe those dollies aren't that ergonomically safe. It didn't seem like employees really had good places to place their hands when they were manipulating these dollies. Also, on top of that, this was a question I asked them, and it just kind of popped out my mouth. Right? Is I wanted to know what a cylinder weighs. Okay, so let me give you an example. These are rated in cubic feet. Okay, for anybody who's not familiar. So let me see if I can pull up a chart for you. I want to see if I can pull up a 200 and a 300 for you. Let me see. I think this is what I'm looking for right here. Okay, here we go right here. So let me show you an example, folks. Okay, this cubic foot right here, this is the one that's almost about a little bit over 5.5 feet tall. Okay, a little bit over 5.5 feet tall. This right here, this 300 cubic foot is the most typical one that we find in a work site, like a refinery and stuff. Okay, the 200 cubic foot or the 100 cubic foot are just a little bit shorter, right? About 4.5 feet. So here's my question to them, right? We had 200s and 300s on this site. And my question to the safety director was, first of all, let's look at the dollies, right? And we started asking employees that were injured, where did they have to place their hands? And what we started noticing is they're having issues on where they had to place their hands. So the two hand crushers obviously put their hand in the wrong place. The two muscle pulls put their hands in places where they wouldn't crush their hands. So, and then we think that there was some awkward body positioning, right? Well, not only that, and then this was my next question, and it kind of, like I said, it just kind of fell out my mouth, which was, what does a cylinder weigh? Well, we went back to like Air Liquid or Liquid Gas, one of those organizations like that, right? Whoever was providing the cylinder, and we asked him what it weighed. He couldn't answer it. I couldn't answer it. The technicians that were working with the gases with the cylinders couldn't answer it. But we need to know, right? When we lift them, we need to know. Well, just so you know, folks, a 200 like this weighed about 109 pounds empty. Okay, and what they were moving was nitrogen. With the nitrogen in it, they said it was roughly about 48 to 52 pounds of nitrogen inside of a gas cylinder like that. So we're roughly looking at about 160 pounds on the 200 full. This one right here, 300. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was either 157 or 159 pounds. So let's call it 60 pounds all day, plus 70 pounds plus a product. So we're talking about 230, 240 pound cylinder here, right? A 300, a 200, we're looking at roughly, 175, 170 pounds, far over the 50-pound limit, right, per employee. Okay. And then on top of that, of course, it's going to roll and crush their finger, right? So ultimately, what happened was the facility ordered new cylinders. We ordered more ergonomically designed cylinders, right, where they could have better hand placement. But not only ergonomically designed, let me go ahead and open a new window, but also in addition to ergonomically designed, but also gas cylinder carts that were more angled now or bent. Okay, there were more that would conform like this, more to the cylinder itself now, right? You see the V there, okay, and then it had the wheels on the backside, just like that. So we took a cylinder dolly, one of the older ones. I'm trying to find the older one for you right now. Something like this almost, right? With a chain on it, with it was more of a flat back because it was much older, hard tires, okay? And so what happened was the cylinder cart, the cylinders would tend to roll in the cart a little bit, so they had to ratchet them down with straps, right? And then when they had like oxygen acetylene setups, we went to this. We went to a 5-foot wall in between it, right? 30-minute firewall, oxygen on one side, acetylene on the other, and then strapped, zipped in. Okay. So, like I said, it just depends on how old those cylinder carts are sometimes too. So just food for thought for you, right? And that's what we see most of them nowadays. Most of them are really V now or rolled in more than they used to be. And for that reason, so we don't have them rolling back and forth, and they're easier to go and secure. A lot of people don't realize that when you secure these cylinders, the OSHA standard is going to say, and the Compressed Gas Association says that this is going to have to be a chain or wire rope. So we can't use synthetic. They had the wire rope and chain, and they were using synthetic to kind of tighten it down to their carts, right? They were using a single gas cart, though. The two that got injured, they were using like a single gas cart. So yeah, it helped, but it still shifted on them. Okay. So that just gives you an example, folks. Okay. So the body part, right? Like I was talking about, and then let's close out the last two bullet points. And then the type of injury, like we were talking about, hand injuries, two hand injuries, two groin injuries, right? What we did is we found the trend. right? So that's how we went ahead and took care of that trend. And then ultimately, hours worked in the previous 24 hours. Look, when we get tired, we start making poor decisions, right? When we get tired, we start having bad posture, right? Bad lifting techniques, bad hand positioning. So it's things that we need to really be cautious of, because as the body gets fatigued, the mind gets fatigued also. Okay, so that's it, folks. I mean, that's everything as far as accident investigation, and then accident data collection and analysis as well. Um, there are your questions again, your 10 questions. I think everybody's got the answer keys for both books. If you don't, please, by all means, email me. I think I've sent them out multiple times already, but I know a couple of you out there were having problems with your, I think it was going to your junk mail or something like that, or it was bouncing back. So if for some reason, if you haven't gotten answer keys to both books for the questions that are in the end of both books, like most of you know, in this book, safety technology book, you only have questions in at the end of each section, and those are the questions that I sent out. They're really a great review also to help with the test as well. They really help out to get to the test, and also they're a great learning aid to pick up and go ahead and kind of put a little bit more of the information in perspective. And then in the first book, in the safety, in the field safety book, it's we sent everybody the answers to the white questions in the back of each module, and then the section questions, which are the green section questions. At the end of each module, you already have the answers to the green questions already in that field safety book. Okay, so folks, this is it. We're going to wrap up early tonight. There's no sense in getting into anything else. If anybody has got any questions or anything, I'm going to leave, you know the drill. I'm going to leave the session on for about the next 5 minutes, okay, 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'll shut it down. If not, call me, text me, email me. And by all means, if we need to clarify anything, I'm very happy to. Okay. Y'all have a great night. Thanks again for your, for viewing. And then y'all just holler at me if you have any questions. And if not, we will reconvene on Tuesday. Okay, folks. Thank you. Have a good night.